KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
So how do you deal with the possibility of layoffs? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, when you start thinking of a potential recession, unemployment can become a worry. Today, Crown CEO Chuck Bentley is here to share a few thoughts on the road to come. Chuck, always great to have you, my friend.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's always a pleasure for me as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on whether or not we have a recession coming, which is interesting to me, and I know that you follow markets really closely. Generally speaking, when you got everybody looking for something that's going to happen, it doesn't happen. You know, it's kind of one of those ironies of Wall Street. But, you know, one thing for certain is that companies are acting as if it is a sure thing by announcing layoffs. You know, and this especially, we're seeing this in the tech area. What makes tech companies so vulnerable to layoffs?
Well, I think that because they grow so fast, Bob, you know, they tend to hire up as they're scaling up, and then they think, oh, you know, we've overdone it. And particularly, they had to hire up during COVID because so many things went online. Church services went online. Remote workers went online. Everything bulked up because of COVID. And now things are normalizing. People are going back to church. They're not watching streaming services as much. Many people are going back to the office. And so now they're downsizing or right-sizing, as some would say, according to the economic adjustments.
Yeah, and I think that there is, of course, we'll talk about the opportunity here in a little bit, but I think you gotta take the question, what do you do? And look at it from a spiritual aspect and look at it from a practical aspect. And from a spiritual aspect, of course, this causes a lot of stress. But at the same time, it is an opportunity, you know, for you, your spouse, to seek God's direction for your life and rest in His assurance that everything will be okay. How do you get into that place together as a couple?
Well, a lot of times in a couple, one is very opportunity-based and one is very security-based. My wife and I are complete opposites. She feels a need for security on almost everything and every issue, especially when it comes to money. And
Yes.
I'm a risk taker, and you know we sometimes have a challenge with that because I drive with my foot on the gas and she's always hitting the brake pedal. But you know, what brought us together is just we both trust in God, and we know that He is sovereign, that He has our future in His hands, and that we don't control the universe. I remember Larry Burkett saying years ago in one of his writings that the happiest day of his life when he resigned as controller of the universe, that God was in control. And when you lose your job, you feel so vulnerable emotionally because our security is tied to our income so many times.
Yes.
And when both of you say, all right, we've got no choice, we've got to trust the Lord, I think it's actually a good and helpful place to get to because that's reality, whether you realize it or not. We all have to trust God with our future.
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking that if you had a top 5 list of stresses, this one's definitely got to be in the top 5.
Oh, no doubt about it. Losing your job is a shock, and it creates so much fear, and that's exactly where Satan likes to get a hold of us. You know, he doesn't have control of us, but if he can get us afraid and we start making decisions based on fear, then essentially he's calling the shots because, you know, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, and perfect love casts out fear, and we have to recognize that God loves us, and He knew what was coming, and He knows what tomorrow will hold for us.
You know, I always like looking at things from the standpoint of opportunity. And, you know, when you talk about the tech sector, there is tons, unlimited amounts of opportunity. But I think, you know, things without question, go in cycles. So I look at it, from the standpoint of you close one door and God is going to open up a door to a brighter future, brighter opportunity, bigger opportunity. How do you go about looking for that opportunity, but at the same time, the importance of keeping God's will at the forefront of that search?
Well, I think that's a great perspective, Bob. Harvard did a longitudinal study on what brings people the most happiness and satisfaction in life, and part of it is a positive outlook on what's to come. When we anticipate the future through a lens of opportunity, as you described, then we're more likely to find it. And oftentimes, opportunity is defined by pain. There's a pain that needs to go away, and finding a solution to that pain is what creates the opportunity. If you look back at some of the best product innovations, some of the best services that we have today, somebody was in pain and thought, how do I get rid of this? And it was through that an innovation came, or a new product came. And God takes pain and He redeems it. He says in the Scripture that He can turn ashes into beauty. And to me, that just magnifies that nothing is impossible for God. If you can take ashes and make something beautiful from it, then you are definitely a God that we can trust.
To piggyback on what you just said, which is so true, the absolute worst thing that you can do, and I hope that people hear this and they're like, yeah, but really, no, the absolute thing that you can do is just sit around and dwell on what could go wrong. And it's such a temptation to do that. And the positive mindset is just so very important. I always think, Chuck, of Proverbs 23:7, first part of that verse, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. And it's just so very important to have that positive mindset.
Well, totally. To me, and I could get very philosophical about this, but there's a tremendous power in a thought. There's a tremendous power in an idea. As business people, if you have an idea and you act on it, and it becomes something that now exists, a new service, a new product, a new way of doing things, that's remarkable to me. That's why God says that His ways are higher than our ways and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and that when we renew our mind according to Scripture, we actually can experience knowing God's thoughts. And that's exciting to me. No matter how bleak my circumstances may seem, I'm not separated from God, and He'll be there with me through them.
Yeah, it's such a powerful belief that, and the reality is that God's going to be with us no matter what. That it's a guarantee and does not change. It really changes the perspective of things as you dwell on that which is true. But we do have the practical aspects of handling this situation. You have a column at crown.org, this Ask Chuck, which is where I took a lot of this from. And so listeners can go to crown.org and actually read this piece that you wrote. But you reference a list of questions to ask from a Harvard Business Review article. This is an excellent list, and it's good because it really does cover a lot of what you need to know. You got to take inventory of money so that Chuck always calls it a shelf life. What's your shelf life? How long you can go before you have to start getting creative. There comes a point where you really drastically got to make some changes. What are some of the questions that you need to ask?
Well, according to Harvard Business Review, you need to ask your employer if you've received notice that you'll be laid off. Find out when's your last paycheck. Ask if you're going to get paid for unused vacation time or sick days. Will there be a severance package? And then how long do you have to exercise stock options? And will health care be provided, or do you need to go on a COBRA plan? Those are some of the basics. A lot of times when you get notice you're being laid off, you freeze and you begin thinking about your next job versus parting on good terms with your existing job and your existing employer.
Yeah, I always think about it from the standpoint if something like that does happen, you got to get to work immediately, and because that's your job now, is to find that next opportunity.
We think exactly alike about that, Bob. I've been laid off in my past, and I remember coming home and telling Ann that some people describe this as unemployment. I said, but I have a job, and my job is to find the next job, and I'm going to be working as hard at that as I could possibly can.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown, and a great author of the books. He's got, you can go to crown.org and check out what Chuck's got online there. But so thankful to have Chuck on the program as a resource every month that he comes on. And Chuck, I'm assuming there's some great resources at crown.org if you find yourself in this situation.
Well, no doubt about it. We produced years ago, actually during the 08-09 great financial crisis, we produced what's called a crisis budget. And the crisis budget was for people who felt a little bit paralyzed by fear and circumstances, and they were trying, I call it trying to swing from one trapeze bar to another. Many people felt like they didn't have a safety net under them during the great financial crisis. So we started this teaching people how to develop a crisis budget. And essentially, it's just a bare bones version of what do you have? What do you know that you have to live on? And you total up all of your monthly income, whatever that may be, and then you figure out how much you have coming in severance or unemployment benefits or available savings. I like your term. You determine what's your shelf life. How long do you have to exist before you get to that other trapeze bar? And then you commit to living on whatever it is that number is. It's a little bit like playing limbo, Bob, we used to do in the skating rink, where you set the bar and you got to limbo under it. And your bar is your income. And if your income is really low, then you've got to get limber and get really low on what you're going to spend. That's a crisis budget.
The skating rink, that's a visual I have not thought about in a long time.
Well, I was never very good at it, Bob, but there were some people, I call them skate rink nerds. They could do it really well. They seem to live in, they could skate backwards.
I just out of curiosity, your thoughts, not to, I guess when you look at the crisis budget, you typically are sitting down during a quote unquote crisis to put it together. I've always felt like that is, from a stewardship standpoint, something that you do ahead of time while you still have a job, and not to be, have negative anticipation that you're going to get laid off, but just be ready. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's great advice. Bob, you must do this for a living. You're way ahead of me there, because anytime we're prepared, we're so much better off. Yes. Someone was asking me, do I get nervous when I give a talk? And I said, no. And they said, well, what makes you get over your nervousness? I'm prepared.
Yes.
I'm not winging it. I'm not going to just, try to figure it out while I'm on the spot. And I think it's very similar with finances. If you prepare for the unexpected, as my wife always said, why do we call them unexpected? The unexpected always happens.
Yes.
Why don't you just be prepared for the hot water heater to go out or have to replace your tires. My son's car broke down yesterday. You have to expect the unexpected, and that's really what you're saying is be wise and anticipate these things.
It also, what a great opportunity it is when you're going through a situation like this, that you openly share with your kids so that this can become a learning experience for them, that hey, everything's not always great. And sometimes you have to go through these things, and so that they can start to notice this is how we respond to situations like this, both spiritually and from a practical standpoint. And hey, we've got to cut back. And I think it's a good a good experience to openly share with your family so everybody can be a part of it.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's a great learning experience. Our children learn when we're vulnerable. They learn when we're transparent, and they know that we've got issues. It's when we sort of pretend to be perfect or have it all together that they can't relate to us anymore. I remember one time we were going through a hard time, and my son one of the children was asking if he could do something, and we couldn't afford it, which is a hard thing for a parent to say or tell their children. But I asked him to just go outside, walk around the house, and see if he saw money growing on any of those trees. And if he did, let me know about it, because, I didn't have a tree where money was just growing at the time. I wasn't well prepared at that moment in my life. And he got a laugh about it, but sometimes I remind him, I still don't have one of those trees.
That is so funny that you say that, because I do the exact same thing. I call it the money tree. And every time my son came to me one time and goes, "Dad," just as innocent as possible, he goes, "Why don't we have a beach house?" And I said, "Son, just go out in the backyard. The money tree is out there, and just see if there's anything on it. And that should answer your question." I don't know where I got that. I don't know where I got that from, but I do the exact same thing that you do, because it makes a point.
Well, you remind me of another story, and I have to be careful not to run out of time here. But
no, we're good.
We were on a vacation years ago. My oldest son was just a little boy, and we were with two affluent families that invited us to join them. And, we could barely afford to be there, but we were sitting at this table, and out of the blue, my son looks at me with these other guys at the table, and he goes, "Dad, are we rich?" And I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe he asked me that." In front of other people. Guys hate to talk about that stuff. And I just looked at him and said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "Really? How rich are we?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm the richest person in the world." And he goes, "Okay, you're making that up, Dad." And I said, "No, I have the riches of Christ, and nothing can, it can replace that." And I was actually thinking about C.S. Lewis, who said the man who has Christ in his life and the whole world has nothing more than the guy who just has Christ in his life. And I really try to live that way, Bob.
You in the article and towards the end, you quoted Joshua 1:9. I mean, what a great verse to have faith in. And sometimes I think it helps to get those what I call cornerstone or foundational verses that just plainly say, "I'm here. I'm going to take care of you." And it always gives you that shot of confidence that you need, that hey, don't forget the Holy Spirit resides inside of you, and God is always with you.
Always. And the verse to be strong and courageous doesn't mean that there's not frightening circumstances.
Sure.
Courage is taking action when you are afraid, when it is dangerous, when it is daunting and intimidating. And the Lord said, take the next step. I think Martin Luther King Jr. said, faith is taking the step on a stairway when you can't see the next step is even there.
That's good.
You just step. You take the action by faith, contrary to how your emotions may be telling you that you should feel.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Chuck Bentley's with me today. He's here every month, stops on by to talk a little bit of stewardship with us. And if you want more information, go to crown.org. It's a wonderful ministry that can help you in a lot of different ways. So go check all that out and see what you think. This is going to be an off-the-wall question to you, and that's why I send these ahead of time to make sure that it's not too off the wall. You didn't flag anything with this question, so I want to bring it up. Artificial intelligence, rise of a new technology, or not a new technology, but becoming a newer technology, makes me think about your book, The 7 Gray Swans and Trends. Do you see anything that could categorize this as a gray swan?
Well, I thought it was a great question, Bob, because I think, in fact, it is. A gray swan means it's a danger or a risk that you can identify, you see it coming, but you tend to ignore it because you think it's a low probability to really impact you. But there are a lot of really bright people that are describing artificial intelligence as a significant gray swan event, that it's going to change the whole world. I just wonder, Bob, do you have an opinion on how dramatic the impact is going to be? Have you thought deeply about that?
Well, there's a couple of takeaways. I mean, the first is the sky is the limit when it comes to technology. I think we've seen that. The second thing, though, that kind of troubles me, I've never seen a situation that potentially could turn into a bubble type market because of it, so advertised before the market really even goes up. Does that make sense?
You'll have to take it a step further for me to understand what you're saying.
Well, the situations like this, the next big thing. So you're looking at 7 or 8 stocks that are potentially the next big thing. You typically don't see that advertised at the very beginning. I mean, it just develops over time, and all of a sudden you wake up and you go, wow, there's a bubble in technology stocks. And so that is kind of one of these things where we're all focusing on one thing to happen. Are we focusing on the right stocks? Is this really warrant some of these stock values that are going to occur because these stocks went up? And that's just kind of an odd thing that I don't think I've ever really seen. I mean, technology stocks back in the 90s took off, and it was a long time before people really got involved into it and was talking about it as a bubble.
Well, I go back to some of my early days growing up. I remember when credit cards became very, very common.
Yes.
And the threat at that time is we'll be 100% cashless overnight. And there was so much fear around credit cards, and it didn't materialize. 30% of people still operate on a cash basis. 30% are still unbanked in our country. So it hasn't taken over the world. It's certainly moving in that direction, but it's much slower than people anticipated. And I read both sides of the coin on AI, and there are people that are very, very skeptical that it's way overhyped and that it's not going to create a dystopian future where it replaces people's jobs and we're all, in need of welfare because we've just been outsmarted by computers. So, and the other side of it is that it is going to impact a certain segment of the employable population, and they need to be aware of that, particularly those that are maybe in positions that are clerical in nature. But God gave man a brain, and artificial intelligence doesn't have a brain.
Right.
It is simply regurgitating what's already been produced by the human brain. So I'm not as intimidated by it, and I don't believe as much as the hype about it as maybe others do.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I think to answer your question, got to see a whole lot more. Everybody loves to jump on that bandwagon, and it's cool. It's what could happen and all this kind of thing. But I think I'm with you. I think we've got to see a lot more of the development of this idea and see what happens. But Chuck, always great that you can come on the program. We'll love having you. You have such great information. Once again, crown.org is where you go to get more information.
Well, God bless you, Bob. Keep up the good work.
God bless you as well. Take care. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Once again, the name of that website is crown.org. Go check it out. There's a lot of great information on it, and it's some that can really be a big help in, if you are facing a situation that you would be laid off. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.